Disinformation knows no borders, and today the stakes seem higher than ever. Welcome to Truth Talks, a brave new podcast series tackling the challenges of fake news and propaganda head-on. Join us for engaging short conversations with experts from all EU member states and Ukraine as we uncover the truth behind dominant disinformation trends and explore the strategies shaping Europe's fight against manipulation. In this episode, we are zooming in on Estonia. Our guest today is Murumaa-Mengel, Associate Professor of Media Studies Institute of Social Studies at the University of Tartu. Welcome to Truth Talks.
Hello.
Hello. As a digitally advanced nation on the EU's border with Russia, Estonia has been a frequent target of disinformation campaigns, particularly from foreign actors, but maybe not only. What are the dominant disinformation narratives circulating in Estonia today?
There are many, and not all of them are disinformation. Lots and lots of information disorder is created by misinformation, just people not understanding the whole picture, just being scared, being angry, sharing stuff that they haven't fact-checked, just, human things. But what we know from working with researchers and practitioners from different fields and analyzing the disinfo narratives is that usually existing divides and social problems are a very fertile ground for creating chaos, creating panic, creating distrust towards different institutions. And it's the same in Estonia. Whatever is already there, whatever people are arguing or debating heatedly about is being used. So, for example, I think that most European countries have faced similar things with migration, with the legalization of same-sex marriages, with pandemics, with life quality and, rising prices of everything, with nature, sustainability, climate changes. So whatever people are arguing about is being used systematically and strategically. But for Estonia, we have a couple of, they're not that unique because quite similar narratives are being disseminated about Ukraine. The narrative of a failed state. So anything that makes the Estonian Republic as a country seem like a country that is not actually a country. Although Estonia has a very long history and we are linguistically very different and so on, but still the narrative goes that it's not really a state. Similar bits and pieces were circulated about Ukraine, and also it comes with this Soviet nostalgia. And we have, for example, on social media, lots and lots of social media groups and thematic forums that are very retro-utopian. So they are looking back at the good old Soviet times and remembering things about Soviet times that were brighter in people's memories. And I think that the older generations are extremely vulnerable towards these kinds of soft power, long game manipulation tactics because the world is always changing and all of the media generations and all of the generations are looking back at their childhood and youth as being a lovely time, the best time. We didn't have the phones and we could go and run outside and be strong and independent, but today's snowflakes, da-da-da-da-da. These kinds of narratives, but also the good old times, we didn't have all of these confusing things like gays or disabilities or whatever, this deeply flawed understanding and so-called memories of things that people think were true, although they weren't. And these groups are amplifying these narratives very strongly. And also, of course, the big bad NATO, West, EU with, moral decay and the loss of the good old patriarchy and traditional family models and all of that kind of stuff. Because recently we have been working on the topic of gendered disinformation and see how hyper masculinities are often at the forefront of these huge stories that we tell each other about how the good old days, and not only the good old days, but right now in Russia, everything is, in patriarchal order, and it's a good thing. And the morally corrupt West is suffering and is doomed because of the liberal, equality-based, solidarity-based choices that we have made. So I think that in very general tones, these narratives tend to be the same because they work so well. It's us versus them. It's demonization. It's, all of these kind of like the essentials of our brains, like how our brains work. And that's why we're seeing similar things in Estonia, in Ukraine, in the US, wherever.
So do you think it's so much of disinformation and misinformation, as you mentioned? Or is it often simply an opinion, some kind of interpretation that comes from some fringe areas, and in this bottom-up direction it rises and mainstreams itself?
Of course, because, it's a good thing that people are, debating and thinking about the world and the changes and everything. We want that. We don't want a two-party system or one-party system where you would have like one voice. Everybody has to think the same way. It's not it's not healthy for a democracy. But we get worried when we see very similar repeated elements in people's, grassroots up type of posts, where there is, for example, in 2022, when Ukrainian people were arriving to Estonia, there was a specific story that was being told in all over the Baltics. And it had similar nuances, small places like villages in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. Ukrainians who were escaping the war had migrated there, started to become a part of these communities, and there was a specific story that was being repeated, that these bad Ukrainians, they don't care about the local communities, and they urinate on like monuments or like very meaningful places. So taking a literal piss on things that matter to small communities. And although the places and the monuments and these things changed, the story was the same. And it was originated from Russia to spread this kind of disgust to the Ukrainians, to make them seem like animals, like barbarians, which they are not, obviously. But the story is a strong manipulation technique. We are keeping an eye open for these kinds of elements.
You mentioned Russia, and it's exactly the direction I wanted to go towards now, because you mentioned several times that disinformation, misinformation narratives are being used strategically and systemically. So I would like to ask you, by whom? Who are the actors that are active in Estonia in creating and in spreading disinformation, misinformation?
I think that there are several types of actors. Many people are just being human, and we do it by accident. Like, we're all flawed. We get tricked, duped. We just do stupid stuff. But when it comes to deliberate manipulation of the publics, first, and that's because I do research on these fields, and that's why I go first to these. If you would ask from someone else, they would name things in different order, probably, or do the typology in a different way. But I would say first are people who are trying to make money off of this situation, off of the information disorder, fear, just like general angst of the poly crisis that we're in. These can be people who are selling their webinars or life coaching or miracle magical solutions, or, the protective Pendle, whatever kind of esoteric stuff, for example. But it's like sorry to say it like that, but it's a clusterfuck of different narratives. So in Estonia, we're seeing very strongly that these esoteric, self-healing crystals and all of this kind of pseudo beliefs or like alternative belief systems are very heavily tied to conspiracy theories, to the general huge narratives that are, usually being flung here from Russia, or they are migrating from the United States very often. The big 5 or the 12 or whatever number of the conspiracy theory networks, for example. So we're seeing people who are seeing this as an opportunity, and they're like, hey, I have a solution for you. Give me your money. I'm going to make things better. And I'm very worried about this sector because that's the worst of humans. Of course, many believe, they actually believe that they can do these protective bubbles around people and speak to angels and whatever. And that's misinformation, right? Because if you really truly believe in that, and then that's kind of, expected and that's okay in a way. But people who are cynical about it and who are like, that's a money-making situation for me, I have no respect for these kinds of people. So I would say that they are a huge, very vague, kind of this fluid part of our information disorder. Then we have politically motivated long game actors. In Estonia also we have pro-Russian small parties popping up who are sometimes very openly talking about returning to Russia. Of course, that's not their main messaging because Estonian Russian-speaking communities often don't want that. They are really loyal and they like Estonia and they are okay with Estonia being an independent country, at least. So the message is usually veiled in good neighbors. Let's return to the, being good neighbors to each other. Let's not poke the bear. We stand for like good relations and so on. So that's one. And also the populist parties who are not pro-Russian in their saying, but rather the opposite, that are usually, taking the national symbols, the flags, the national bird, whatever, and they're really, really nationalist in their presentation and branding. They are flirting with parties and actors and also funding that is very often tied to huge propaganda networks. So we have a couple of parties have been shown in the journalistic investigative pieces to have ties with Hungarian right-wing and very religious groups, and they get some of their funding from there. So it's this kind of network that has more of a political ambition, not just give me your money type of belief.
Kind of disinformation international.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything is international because so much of the conspiracy theories, of the heroic figures, of the messiah type saviors, they're not local. They're very often, Trump, Putin, whoever are these big, strong, masculine leaders right now, or at least how they want to portray themselves. And then I think that when we're talking about actors and agents on this field, of course, we cannot be that naive and blue-eyed and not expect Russia to have a huge operation, strategic communication, strategic info manipulations that are directed to each and every country that is at least bordering them, but of course, further as well. So we are seeing that there are people whose whole job is to comment all day long from different accounts. Just, the messages they don't even have to be pro-Russian, but they just have to be eroding trust, creating chaos, creating this fog of mixed messages. And I'm afraid that we have downplayed the number of these actors who are like, 50 Cent Army or whatever we have historical evidence from other countries. And that's one of my heart topics as well, something that I'm really passionate about and something that we have really changed, because we used to say that for people's mental health and for individual well-being, it's okay to withdraw from information spaces, to go on media diets, to stay away from the disturbing news. But we're not saying this anymore. We're saying that it's a citizen's duty, actually, to stay informed and to actually speak up. Even if you're scared of the troll armies, even if you're scared that somebody might see it and be like, oh, you're in there with the swines and, wrestling in the mud, you have to do this. Because otherwise, the small minority who get paid, is deeply misinformed, or is, just like a part of the misinformation and disinformation system, their voices will be heard and seen and archived, because it's a written type of communication, which means that every citizen who has expertise in some areas has to be there in social media talking about these things. So my expertise is media, so I'm trying to give additional sources to say that, hey, this is not actually quite correct, or like scientific literacy, this is what I can do. Doctors can be there for the medicine, military personnel can be there for the military issues. Everybody has their expertise, and we want the actual experts to be visible, because we're not fighting in these interactions on social media. We're not actually talking to the troll. I don't even care if they change their mind or whatever. I care about the invisible masses who never leave a mark of their presence, because most social media users are lurkers. They go to social media to just see what people are talking about, to get the vibe, to kind of make up their mind on different issues. And they never leave a trace of themselves, but they really need correct, factual, evidence-based information. And if it's just not there, and there are like these trolls arguing amongst themselves and pushing out ridiculous stuff, then the worldviews and the understanding of how vaccines work, or how, the energy ties are with different countries, they will have a deeply flawed understanding of what do we actually know as humankind and humans, humanity.
Mm-hmm. Although it seems to be a universal feature of the landscape of misinformation and disinformation producing actors, you are the first one in my talks who is mentioning this first group that you talked about, which is the malign actors, kind of bottom up, who just want to make money on disinforming, misinforming people, on their naivety, on their wishful thinking, on their trust. So this group of disinformators seems to be the most malign, because you can never expect from certain categories of accounts to be so malign. So that's fascinating. Also that fact that I mentioned in the beginning, that I'm hearing it from you for the first time, but I see, for example, in Poland, we had a wave of artificial intelligence produced images showing, for example, beautiful, picturesque semi-photo of a country guy that he has created, for example, some kind of a special barn, and no one has lauded him for that. And then there are thousands of comments. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We would like to cherish your product. Do you have that as well in Estonia?
Oh, God, so much. I do think that one way to tackle this is through humor and through ridiculing. And I know that that's a slippery slope, but social sanctioning works on very different levels. And one way is to show opposition through making fun of people and like...
We do that, but fun is going also to certain bubbles.
Yep. There's a really cool Facebook group that has lots and lots of examples like you brought up. So, dear listeners, if you're interested and if you're on Facebook, then there's a group with 200,000 members that is called People Who Think AI Generated Photos Are Real. I suggest joining that because there are like really blunt, ridiculous examples, but also more sophisticated discussions around how to detect AI. And I would say that lots of these people who say, oh my God, that's so beautiful, great job, I would order that, are bots. Because there are so many people who don't really exist and who are just creating traffic. But also, I do think that the older generations are more vulnerable here because we work a lot with young people. And young people, not all, but media savvy young people are more paranoid about materials. And of course, that can lead to other...
You mean skeptical?
I'm saying paranoid even. Looking at everything like, are you is this? Oh, what? No, I don't believe it. So in that sense, like it's borderline paranoia. And also it comes from YouTubers who are creating really very entertaining content about how they are ruining Harry Potter or Shrek via AI tools, and like underlying educational kind of ground there is that the young viewers are learning about AI. Like they are really, really getting good at it. But of course, I'm not saying that we should just, drop the worries about the youth and be like, yeah, let's go and focus only on the older generations. But I'm seeing in my work that younger generations have a better radar for deceptive materials in some cases, but also they are vulnerable to the, general things. If we are just growing up, we're teenagers, we're just making our minds up who we want to be and where do we want to fit in. So influencers and so-called brain rot materials and content has a lot of influence on that. And it can be also used manipulatively.
Coming back a little bit to our main script of the discussion, I would like to ask you about if you have spotted the most widespread fake news in circulation at present.
At present, let me think. It depends on what do we call fake news, because I, quite similarly to many researchers who are working on this field, I don't like the term fake news. It has been hijacked by Donald Trump, and fake news signifies anything that he doesn't like. And also it's a contradictory term because news is fact. So fake things cannot be news, actually. So fake news is not a term I would like. But if we're talking about information that can mislead people, is harmful and false. So then I would say there is a lot of noise right now on the energy topic, energy independence, seeking for alternative sources of energy. We just did a disconnect from Russia, finally. So this topic is up very strongly. And there is a lot of mis and disinformation about like wind power, solar power, and so on. And people are
that it is so bad for you versus Russian gas and other fossils.
Yes. Right now, there is, we have wind power discussions. Where should the big, the wind making machines go up? And I'm seeing that it's once again used to really divide different groups, to not make them actually talk about things that we want to. And very many people are saying like, okay, let's return to the good old energy lines and let's not fool ourselves and so on. But that's like very local, but also quite similar patterns. They went through the same kind of logic and the development in Finland, and also I think in Denmark. So we have journalistic investigative pieces that show that it's really similar. All of the counter arguments are the same. I know that I'm jumping off the trail here again, but one thing that I really want to say, that I'm keeping a keen eye on how people discuss these things on social media threads, and I'm so happy that I'm seeing Estonians trying to find science, trying to understand, because that's what we have been telling them for the past 5 years. Go find the science, try to make sense of it. Don't fall for a stupid YouTube video. Just go and try to find the science. And people are trying to do that, but they don't know that in the scientific literature, there are predator journals, pay for published journals. So they're doing the exact thing that we have asked them to do. Go find the science. And then they come up with the science and they're like, here's a piece of science that says we shouldn't do this. And then we have to tell them, well, not that kind of science. It's like the system is flawed there as well. So now we have to go to scientific literature and scientific literacy to teach people how to understand what is quality science, peer-reviewed, the slow science, and what is whatever goes, push for profit, just make good graphs and create some words type of looks like science. So science washing in a sense. So another topic that we have to deal with. So one thing is the energy independence and energy relations. Then, of course, a lot of chaos is coming from the US. Also deliberate. I think that Trump's administration and Trump's strategy is to create a lot of mixed messages, just like put it all out there. And then slowly things will come back and, not be actually getting to go into action. But it's good for creating confusion, even paralyzing civil society in a way, making people just gasp for air, just drop down and be like, yeah, well, everything is fucked. I don't want to be on this planet anymore. So they're succeeding in this, and very much of this confusion is here as well. And we're seeing that some initial messages are still circling, although they have been put off the table when it comes to deals that Trump is trying to make with Russia and Ukraine as well. On a more fun note, if I may, because otherwise it might get too doom and gloomy. Do you remember back in 2020 or was it even 2021 when very many countries went to lockdown? And then there were these news pieces of nature returning and, trees growing. And for Venice, there was a hoax about dolphins returning to canal.
Yes, I remember the dolphins.
Absolute bullcrap. It didn't happen. It was fake to the bone. But just yesterday, we had class where we were talking with students about all of these weird things that we don't even double check because we like the information. And still some people actually believed, and they were brave enough to admit it, that they still thought that dolphins had returned to Venice canals. So talk about persisting narratives. But that's a feel-good type of story that we just want to believe in. But when it comes to false information circling, it's not usually this fact is wrong, but it's the opinion articles. It's the kind of,
vibe. Disinfo vibe.
Yes, it's the slow preparation, creating a backdrop of, things that we should do, things that are acceptable. The world order changes. Who gets what? Who is justified to get what? So it's usually through hints and memes and jokes and, these kind of soft, frivolous things.
Okay, to stay on conquering doom and gloom, I have my final question. What's being done to counter disinformation in Estonia, and what more would you recommend?
I'm working as a media professional. I have been trained on media and journalism and communication, and universities were crucial from the pandemic times. People were our alumni, a network of professionals, were coming to us to say that we have to do something. And we started to be the hub of non-formal and formal things that we do. So I think that University of Tartu and our team has tried to be there on very many fronts. So media and information literacies, digital literacies as a core competence, even more important than some of the classical subjects that are being taught, is something that we're doing a lot on. We're working with teachers, youth workers, librarians, parents, community leaders, like you name it, we're there, and we're like banging the drum of here's how you check information. Here's how you question the agenda of people. Here's how you do that. Here's how you do that. So we have put together materials that range from kindergarten, because children are independent media users and thus can be vulnerable and radicalized and, just misinformed from the ages of 5 and up. So we have tried to make playful approaches to advancing kids' media and information literacies. Lots and lots of things are being done there. We are trying to push out materials that mirror the lived realities of those who want to learn, so that we will not talk about TV news and how they are created to children who are never viewing the TV news. We're talking about influencers and influencer economy and attention economy to those groups. So this is one thing. The other thing is that we're working internationally with different networks in cooperation with European EDMO network. For example, we have the Baltic Engagement Center for Combating Information Disorders, which is one of the EDMO hubs. And this is crucial for recognizing the similarities in different countries, but also comparing, like the urinating thing, like what is there that is different and what is there that is the same. And also we are making a huge effort to put these out there on many different formats so that people will be inoculated in a sense, like pre-bunking, because these disorders will stick around. We will never get rid of them. It's like a natural part of this type of information ecosystem. Then we are supporting professional journalism however we can as experts, giving them sources, whatever we can do to support journalism, because without free and democratic journalism, democracies will die. It's a matter of fact. We've seen it. Whatever needs to be done to support journalists, to amplify their content, to make it available in different languages, to teach journalists the best we can, making them aware of all of these horrible things and manipulation techniques. This is what we're doing. We have also, at the University of Tartu, we have started a 1-year-long master's program in English that is designed to bring together people who are in the bordering countries mainly, but also, United States, Germany, wherever. And we are dealing with building societal resilience to information disorders. So we have just finished with the first group, and it is amazing because Armenia and Estonia seem like very different countries. But when it comes to disinformation and, sowing the distrust in societies, the techniques are the same. They are exactly the same. So we have a lot to learn from each other and just like share knowledge. What has worked? How do you deal with these things? Then we have, of course, restrictions, lobbying for better laws, for better, grand macro scheme frameworks. And here, Estonia, with a population of 1.3 million people, is a tiny market. Nobody cares for us. Like Meta could care less for the spread of disinformation in this tiny language and tiny culture. So we have to be there with the others and lobby for better laws for very large online platforms and, to put an end to this oligarchy that is happening. So we are trying to support there also with the best knowledge that we have, with the best science that we have, and just to back things up. And then what I spoke about earlier, whoever listens, we are telling them to do something. Like, don't just drop dead and put ground all over you before you're actually dead. Like, you have to do something. Even if it's like a tiny thing, it's a minute out of your day, but leave a mark, make it better. Like, don't let this be the end of us.
Wow, sounds like a lot of layers of very important work that you do in Estonia. So thank you so much. That brings us to an end of our very important conversation about Estonian disinformation landscape, which reveals a lot about the disinformation landscape universally. Maria, thank you so much for shedding the light on these important issues.
Thank you very much for listening to my ranting.
Very important words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Truth Talk series is part of the project Guardians of Truth, fact-checking during Poland's EU presidency, which is supported by European Media and Information Fund, managed by Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation.